Okay. Fine. 2 weeks ago, Hanukkah time, we spoke about Nittel, and we spoke about the two different Nittels, December 25th and the eve of January 7th. It turns out that there's really a third Nittel that we missed discussing. Whatever, like a shtickle off the beaten track Nittel we missed discussing. In addition, there's one extra minig of Nittel that I was hoping to get to last time we spoke that I didn't get to, we're going to get to now in a shtickle more roundabout way. So let me just put it out there what that minig is. There's a book called, it has many different names, but all the names are something to the effect of Sefer told us Yeshu, Sefer told us Yeshu HaNitri, Sefer told us Yeshu HaNittel, Sefer told us HaNittel. It's got many names throughout history, but it's a book that purports to be the Jewish rabbinic perspective to the story of Yeshu, to the story of how Yeshu founded his own religion. And there was a minig back in the day to read that Sefer, to learn that Sefer on the night of Nittel. And that's a minig that I thought was interesting that I want to get to. But we're going to take the scenic route to get to Sefer told us Yeshu. So I just want to start as follows. I'm sure some people are familiar, there's a Sefer called Megillas Tainus. The Gemara Masechtas Tainus, a lot of it is based on the Megillas Tainus. It's something that was written in the Tkufa of the Tanam and Amiraim. It's in Aramaic. It's 12 prakim long. And in it, what it charts out is all the quasi-yamim tovim that existed throughout Klal Yisrael's history. And it starts off, B'hadein yomim deloy lehisanes b'hoim. These are the days that no one should be fasting on. And it goes through many different semi-personal yamim tovim that turn into Klal Yisrael's yam tif, and therefore you don't fast in those days. And the Gemara in Tainus is replete with references from the Megillas Tainus, Kashas, back and forth. It's a brisa, let's call it. It's not a Mishnayos, it's a brisa. Now, what's less famous is that there's a second Megillas Tainus that's in Hebrew, in Lashon Kodesh, written like the way the Mishnayos are written like in regular Lashon Kodesh kind of, like the Mishnayos are written. It's only one parak long, and in most of the editions of the Aramaic Megillas Tainus, it's not there. It's a separate Sefer. But today they publish them together, a Megillas Tainus with 13 prakim, and what it is it's the 12 prakim of Megillas Tainus, the Bryce in Aramaic, together with the one parak in the end of the Megillas Tainus in Lashon Kodesh. But now there's a fundamental difference between the Megillas Tainus in Aramaic, that's the 12 prakim that's quoted in the Gemara, and the Megillas Tainus in Lashon Kodesh that's attached to the end of it. They're exact opposites. The Megillas Tainus in Aramaic is B'hadein yomim deloy lehisanes b'hoim. It's days of personal Yom Tovim, days of Klal Yisrael's Yom Tovim, where it would be improper to have a fast day on the day that's a Yom Tov for Klal Yisrael. The Megillas Tainus Hasheni, call it, the one in Lashon Kodesh, that one is Be'elu Yamim Misanim. On these days we fast. It says, the crowd starts with Be'elu Yamim Misanim Midivrei Torah. These days we fast Midiraisa. Now it isn't Deraisa, they're all the Rabbanan fasts, and the Mefarshim will say that it's written that way to give it a certain chaymer. You shouldn't think that these are minor fasts that aren't important. These are fasts that a person should adhere to. So now, it's interesting to see. If you look at the end of Megillas Tainus, in the end of Parak Yud Beis, it lists off all the Tainusim, and then it makes this transition from Aramaic to Hebrew, and it says, Kol zeh b'yameim, when tsaris were very rare, and life was good, and Klal Yisrael was living in Eretz Yisrael, and they had it good. But b'yameinu, that tsaris are so common, and we're getting kicked around and bounced around, not only should we fast on the days that it says not to fast here, we should be fasting on all sorts of extra days. And that's how it ends. And then it segues straight into Parak Yud Gimel, which is Be'elu Yamim Misanim. So the Mefarshim will speak out that really the additional piece at the end of Parak Yud Beis belongs to Parak Yud Gimel. It belongs to the other Masechtas Tainus, Megillas Tainus, which was written almost as like a response, like an overlay on the existing Megillas Tainus in Aramaic that says all sorts of days not to fast. Came along later Chachamim and said that was great when things were good. Now things are in a bad matzav, and of course there should be fast days, and it's written like as a separate, like almost like a response to Megillas Tainus in Aramaic. So now, so why are we talking about Megillas Tainus? So in Megillas Tainus in Parak Yud Gimel, so everyone knows, in this Megillas Tainus Hasheni, the second piece of it, of B'hadein Yomim, that Be'elu Yom that a person should fast, actually makes it the Shulchan Aruch, straight up. Lifted almost completely. The Shulchan Aruch, it's in Taf Kuf Pei, the Torah brings down this din. He brings down Mamash the Lashon, Be'elu Yamim Misanin Midivrei Torah, and Farshim already, Safanart, it's not really Divrei Torah. He brings it down, the whole list. The Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber copies it. The Mishnah Berurah writes it, meaning this is as a This is Gepaskin Ladina. This is not some obscure favar from a mission that never made it. It's actually brought down in Shulchan Aruch, the Siman in Shulchan Aruch. Now, in there's three Tanaisim that are relevant to us right now. The Megillah's Tainus, it reads as follows. It says, on Ches, it says 3 days in Teves, a person should fast. Ches, Tes, and Yud. Today is Ches, I believe. Tomorrow is Tes, and Tuesday is Asar B'Teves. So, Asar B'Teves, we take a keep, Ganz Klar, so keeps Asar B'Teves. That's one of the Rabbanim Dika fasts that everyone keeps. But in the Megillah's Tainus, it says that Ches and Tes of Teves are also fast days. And Heyois, the Megillah's Tainus notes, Heyois, it's 3 days in a row, which is difficult. This is called the Tainus at Tzadikim. Like, people on high levels should fast this set of Tanaisim, these 3 Tanaisim. Now, the Megillah's Tainus also gives reasons. It says in the Megillah's Tainus, Ches B'Teves is as follows. Why do we fast on Ches B'Teves? And the Megillah's Tainus references what is to us Gemara and Megillah on Daf Tes. The Gemara tells us the story of Talmai, the Egyptian king. It says Talmai was a Greek Egyptian king who was very educated and had a big knowledge of philosophy, etc. And at a certain point, he said, I'd like to also know the Torah. I don't want to just know philosophy, I want to know the Torah too. And he gathered together 72 of the greatest Chachamim, and he put them in independent houses so that they couldn't talk to each other, so that he'd be sure that they're translating it accurately and they're not lying to him. Like this, they have no communication. He made 72 booths and put them in there. And the Gemara Megillah says that a tremendous nest took place, that there were, I think it's 10 shinuyim that they made to the Torah when they translated it. 10 things that they felt that Talmai HaMelech would not be able to understand, that they changed. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it so that all 72 Chachamim, without talking to each other, changed the exact same 10 things. That's what the Gemara Megillah says. So the Gemara Megillah portrays it almost like a Kiddush Hashem. Almost like an amazing story of survival, that we were challenged to translate the Torah into Yavanis, into Greek, and 72 Chachamim independently had to translate it, and still somehow they managed to all translate it the same, which is an amazing story of survival. But now, on this, says the Megillah's Tainus, the Gemara really says in the Megillah too, that on this day, Yarda Chayshech La'ilam, a great darkness came down to the world, the day that the Torah left being the Nachlas of Klal Yisrael, and it became something that was available to everybody, that everyone could read it in their own language. Yarda Chayshech La'ilam, a great darkness came down to the world, and because of that, Ches B'Teves is a very important fast day for us to remember and to commemorate the sadness, the Chayshech that was Yard La'ilam. A gewisse begin of Shikchas HaTorah. The Torah became less personal to us. It became something less that's only ours, and it became something that's available to everyone, and that leads to a great Shikchas HaTorah. Incidentally, the Rav showed me on Shabbos that the Chassam Sefer, in Drash's Chassam Sefer, spends a crazy amount of time on Ches Teves. The Yom Tov of Ches Teves, not the Yom Tov, the Tainus of Ches Teves became a very, very central theme in the Chassam Sefer's Hashkafa. Because the Chassam Sefer held that a big chelik of why Haskalah came and why, the whole breakdown of traditional orthodoxy was because there's a Shikchas HaTorah. People don't connect to the Torah as well. They're not really getting what the Torah is supposed to give you. And because of that, it starts breaking down. So Ches Teves was the day the Chassam Sefer almost every time gave a grace drasha about the Shikchas HaTorah, the breakdown of Torah. So there's probably, 35 editions of his Ches Teves drasha that he gave. He used to give a spade among Gedolim on that day. Ches Teves was a grace day in the world of the Chassam Sefer Eden. Now, continues the Megillah's Tainus, and the Megillah's Tainus says, Tes B'Teves loines galu taimai. This is the Megillah's Tainus. Tes B'Teves loines galu taimai. It wasn't revealed to us what the reason for the fast on Tes B'Teves is. And then it continues, and it says, Asar B'Teves, that's the mothership. That's the day that the walls to Yerushalayim were breached by the conquerors. And from there is really, if we look at it, it could be the kernel of the whole Galus, meaning when the walls are breached is when the Galus begins to happen. So Yud B'Teves is really the ultimate fast. It's even more important than Tisha B'Av in a certain way, because it's Hakol HaChachar, after the Haskalah. That was when the breakdown started. Now, so we have this fast of Tes B'Teves, wedged in the middle between Ches and Yod, that the Megillah's Tainus itself says, we don't know the reason for it. So now, many Mefarshim have stepped in to try to figure out what the tam that's Leinas Galu, what was missing over here. So I'll just give you a sampling of them. For example, the Tosfos Yeshanim says that the tam it's the day that Ezra and Nehemiah were nifter. Ezra and Nehemiah were the ones who built the Beis HaMikdash Hasheni, the Yerushalayim Hasheni. They came back after the Galus Bavel, and they built it. On the day of Tes B'Teves, Ezra and Nehemiah died. Now, many others ask that it isn't true. It's not the day that Ezra and Nehemiah died. We have other rayas that Ezra and Nehemiah died on Asar B'Teves. it's one of the reasons for Asar B'Teves is Ezra and Nehemiah's death. They didn't die in Tes B'Teves. So some poskim say, the Mashal, the Taz seems to hold like this, that Hayois Tes B'Teves was already taken. It was already an important fast, meaning something big happened in Tes B'Teves already. We didn't want to dilute the value of talking about Ezra's death and Nehemiah's death by just lumping it in together with the existing fast of Yud B'Teves. So we made it on Tes B'Teves to make it independent. There's also the death of Ezra and Nehemiah. That other Acharonim retort, we have a klal, we're not makdim peranius. We're never makdim peranius. You never make a remembrance of something bad that happened early. You never makdim peranius. This would be makdim peranius. We don't do that. So that can't be the reason. So others say, and this is a great chiddush, other Mefarshim say that in the back of the Gemara there's something called Mevaya Talmud from Rav Shmuel HaNagid. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at it. In the back of the Gemara there's something called Mevaya Talmud from Rav Shmuel HaNagid. Rav Shmuel HaNagid was a Sephardic Rishon, early Rishon, 900s, like early Rishon. He was the vizier to the king of Granada. He was a very, very powerful person. He was very rich. He was very powerful. He was like that, that dmus of like the court Jew, the ultimate dmus of the court Jew, the one who was very powerful. He had a son of Yosef HaNagid who inherited his stellar, but unfortunately not all of his charisma. And things broke down, and people became jealous, and it led to a great fight within the court of the king, and ultimately he gets killed, and all the Jews of Granada get chased out. And the day that Yosef HaNagid, the son of Rav Shmuel HaNagid, gets killed, and the breakdown of the Granada, of Granadian Judaism starts, is Tes B'Teves. So there are those who say that Chazal, the Ruach Kacham, saw that 1,000 years later there was going to be a grace tzara that would happen in Granada when Rabbi Yosef HaNagid would be kicked out, and because of that they made the tainus of Tes B'Teves already 1,000 years earlier. It's a chiddush ein mikriyetzim de pshute. It's a chiddush to say that they made a fast day for Klal Yisrael that was all based on something that was going to happen 1,000 years later. Mistama, there has to be something that happened now already, and you could also, maybe I'm not denying that there could be that they meant to include the tzara of Rabbi Yosef HaNagid dying on Tes B'Teves, but that should be the entire story of Tes B'Teves is to me a great chiddush. Like that should be the reason for the fast of Tes B'Teves. So there's two other reasons, and now we'll circle back to how this has to do with Toledot Yeshu HaNeitzri and the third Nittel. There's two other reasons that are given by some of the poskim. One of them is that we know Nittel is the day of Yeshu's birthday, the day of Yashka's birthday. Now, we celebrate Yashka's birthday, strangely, in Judaism we celebrate it, we don't celebrate it, we don't learn, we deal with it in a secular manner. Because the day that we attach to it is December 25th to January 7th, which is a secular date. Now, all our dates are Hebrew. We have, our own months with our own dates. We have a lunar calendar. We don't do dates with the secular calendar. There's a grace shaila in the poskim if it's even allowed to date your shtaris with Goyish dates, Sefer. So it's very bizarre that the remembrance of Nittel that is built into our halachas is going with the English date. So there are those who say that it's on purpose, in order to fashem Yeshu and to say you're not one of us, you're not a Yid, you're not one of us. We don't respect your Yiddish yartzeit. We give you a yartzeit like a guy. You're going to have a yartzeit like a guy the 25th of December. But now says many early Kadmonim say that if you make the calendar cheshbon, the day that December 25th, and it would only be December 25th, and there was no January 7th yet, we spoke about that already, the day that December 25th fell out, call it, depending on how you want to date it, 2,000-ish years ago, was Tes Teves. And Memela, the fast of Tes Teves was to, we're sad that on that day, the schism, the break with Yeshu, came into Klal Yisrael, and all the damage and the tsaras that came from that, and to remember that, we have a fast on Tes Teves. Now, so the problem with this is that the dating becomes a problem, meaning it has to match the year, Taka. There has to be a year that we could all agree upon, that it was that year that was Tes Teves, and that was the day that Yeshu HaNeitzri died. Now, so that's a big problem. I'll talk about that in a second. Let me just leave that aside. Was born. Depends who you ask.
They would have a tinus on the day he died?
No, a tinus on the day he died, because if the Christian story, the theme is that the day he died, he didn't really die. That's when he became Mashiach. The second coming, the Mashiach, that they believe that Yeshu came and was the Mashiach already, and said all his nevuos that Klal Yisrael was not the nation anymore, now it's them. That has to do with his death, not really his birth. His birth, he was just a baby somewhere, big deal. His death is when the whole chain of motion, of the religion starts. Now, it's.
The 25th is his birth.
That's the problem. The Christians certainly celebrate the 25th as his birth. There are some, Kadmonim who say that they have it wrong, and it's really his death. It's not his birth. Now you have to keep in mind that the Christians' knowledge of when exactly he died and lived is by far no better than ours. Meaning, they are mostly, primarily, making up, fitting things in, making narratives, creating a story. It's not set in stone. Just because they celebrate it as his birthday does not at all mean that that's his birthday. It's totally open that it could have been the day he died, or none of the above, or neither. So, b'chalaifin, some early Mefarshim say that it was the day that he was born, the day that he died, and therefore we talk about it. Now, I'll tell you what that has to do with Toledot Yeshu. 1 second. Now, there's a second, even more out there idea that also, and this directly comes from the Sefer Toledot Yeshu. There is no other source for it, for this whole story, other than the Sefer Toledot Yeshu. I'll tell you as follows: the Christians, they still believe this. This is in their gospel, their books, whatever they quote, whatever they have. That Yashka had his apostles, right? He had his 13 Talmidim who were with him, who were his Talmidim. Now, of his Talmidim, the most famous ones are Peter and Paul. Now, Peter becomes the first pope. Peter is the first pope. He goes to Rome. He's the first pope. The church in the Vatican is called St. Peter's Basilica. It's his church. Peter's the pope. Now, in the Sefer Toledot Yeshu, there's a story as follows. Where, at the end of it, let's do this the right way. Let me read a little bit from the Sefer Toledot Yeshu. Let's leave this last reason for a minute. We'll circle back. But let's leave this last reason. That's what we need. I'll just read you. What do you say? No. The Sefer Toledot Yeshu is a book that has, I think today it's been chronicled to have 43 editions. So it's very much something that's passed down, b'chashoy, not in a organized way. There's 43 editions. Ad kedei kach that in 2009, not too long ago, Princeton University had a conference to figure out the origins of the Sefer Toledot Yeshu. They gathered together every professor and scholar, many of them goyim, who were working on Sefer Toledot Yeshu in various versions. They gathered them together in one space where they could give drushes to each other and figure out exactly where the book comes from and how it came. And after the conference, the heads of the conference published a book. It's 400 pages long. I downloaded it. I did not read all of it, but I looked through it, and the consensus over there was that they don't know where it came from, and just that it's very old, just meaning that we have the earliest editions of it are from 1700 years ago, a very, very long time ago. It was originally written in Aramaic. It's very old. It exists. Who exactly wrote it and who exactly gave it over and how all the editions came to be, that's a matter of very, very gray area. Now, there is, for some reason...
It was written by Yidden?
So that's a machlokes too. It seems, for the most part... So there's the Igeris of Yochanan ben Zakkai. Oh, he has Google out already. I see the phone in the hand. There is an Igeris of Yochanan ben Zakkai, and there are some who hold... okay, we'll get to Igeris of Yochanan ben Zakkai also, which is not as fascinating, yeah. There are some who say it's Yochanan ben Zakkai, others say it's not Yochanan ben Zakkai. Let's just... let's not get lost in the weeds here, but the primary edition that made it to popularity was actually written by a guy. The edition that most Jews have today, that's in all the different Jewish svarim that collect these obscure sources, is written by a guy, written by a priest whose name I can't pronounce, Jan something. What do you say? A priest who wrote it. What do you say? Yeah, no, something. A priest who wrote it down. That's the edition that made it. And I'll just so you understand that this is not just something that's not important. Some Sefer, who like we mentioned, took a great deal of work into these Chestas and Yud Tanesim, came across Sefer Toledot Yeshu. He did not own one. He found one in someone else's house, and he sat down to copy it in his own handwriting so that he could have it. So I imagine his time was valuable to some Sefer, and he didn't copy things that were Narishkeit. We have today, they sold actually in auction, we have today the first few pages. Most of it didn't survive. We have the first few pages. The Sefer wrote copious Hagayis on it. He copied it down in Lashon Kodesh in his own handwriting, and he wrote copious Hagayis on it, long Hagayis with Aris from Gemaras and Chazals and had a shtim. We have something that was printed. It was published a few years ago in a Sefer called
from the priest.
From the priest. That's the version that we have from Sefer. We only have today 2-3 pages of it. It was published in there's a Sefer called Yerusha Seinu in Eretz Yisrael that puts out these things. They published some Sefer's edition of Toledot Yeshu, whatever's left of it, the first few pages. But I'm just saying, the Sefer copied it down in his own hand. We have some of it in his own handwriting, the Sefer writing it down. Now, Okay, so let me say over a little bit of it, and with that we'll get to the maybe the coolest reason for the fast of Tes B'Teves. So now in the Hakdama to this version of Sefer Toledot Yeshu, it says as follows. It says, okay, Zah Kuntrus Uba Kabbalah Ishmi Piyish. This is a kuntrus that was given over Ishmi Piyish. Asher Nittel Likasav Levad V'Leil Halas Atfus. It should only be transmitted in manuscript form. It should never be given over in printed form in a way that it could be very popular and it could get out to everybody. V'Chalil L'Kreisi B'Pumya, which we're going to try not to be overrun. You cannot read it in a public setting. Not to read it publicly. Ki Yisagad L'Farsamai. Can't, people are going to find out. It's going to be a bad thing. Okay, he says, and Al-Kain, Persumai Le'yadanu B'Diyak. Since it's something that is passed down, in this type of sneaky type of way, we don't exactly know who wrote it and where it comes from. The Pashtus is it was written as a response to missionaries and people who were trying to convince Jews to become Christians, and that's where Rabbi Yochanan Zaka comes in that he's referring to. Fine, okay, and this is the Sefer that exists, and one should read this and then be able to make a bracha with kavanah of Shalei Sanigoy. You'll read it and you'll understand that you should have pride in Shalei Sanigoy. And you'll accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, HaKadosh Baruch Hu by saying Shema Hashem Lekechad, Hashem Lekeinu Hashem Echad. And it's kedai to spend a little bit of time enduring the tales of Yashkas, of Yeshu's life, so that you should be zeichet to Elam Haba. This is the Hakdam of the Sefer, and here's how it ends off. Yeshu kasvu shaya minig l'kreisei b'y b'leil nittel. And there are those who say the minig was, and this is Hakdama that's written in the 1700s, it's quite a while ago, that the minig was to read this on Nittel. So tonight is technically a third Nittel. It's Tes B'Teves. We weren't Mekayim this on the first Nittel or the second Nittel, so we'll try to go through it today. The Kayim minig of reading it on Leil Nittel. So I'll tell you over it's long. It's a lot of pages, but I printed it out for you myself here. I'll give a little bit of an abstract, the overview of what happens over here. So it tells the story as follows. It says, "B'yimei." So the Shaz should do it this way or not? Okay. Let me just before I do this, let me just say one more nakuda. The dating of Yeshu in the Gemara is an area of a great mevucha, because everything that was written about Yeshu in the Gemara was censored. It was all taken out and then later put back in or added in. So we don't really know what's accurate. Who did Chazal tell us Yeshu was? We don't have a really good Havan of that. So I'll read you. There's a few Gemaras. They're all from the Chesronos HaShas. They were all taken out, but they've all been added back in today. One of them is on Sanhedrin Daf Kov Zayin. Most Gemaras don't put it actually back in the text. They put it like an Nagais Tzionim on the side. I'll just read you because this is the primary Chazal, real Chazal in the Gemara that the Gemara describes Yeshu. The Gemara says as follows: Kasher harag Yanei HaMelech has HaChachamim. When Yanei HaMelech killed all the Chachamim, so Rabbi Shua ben Prachya was one of the Chachamim. Halach Barach Alexandria Sham Mitzrayim. He ran away to Alexandria and Mitzrayim to escape the decree of all the Chachamim who were being killed. Kasher Hoya Shalim, when everything came back to normal, when there was peace in Yerushalayim, and he was able to come back home. Shalach le Shimon ben Shetach. So Shimon ben Shetach, who was the one remaining Chacham who stayed in Yerushalayim, who was the brother-in-law of Yanai, he was able to stay. So he stays. He sends him a message and he says, "Mimeni Yerushalayim Merakaydesh Elecha Alexandria Shal Mitzrayim." He sends a message from me in Yerushalayim to you in Alexandria. Come back. It's time to come back. So Amar Rabbi Shua ben Prachya Shmami Nashani Shalom. Vice says things are good. It's time to go back. So on his way, Kasher Ba Nikla La'isa Achsanya. He stopped into a inn on the way on his travels up to Yerushalayim. So Kamu Ba'alei Achsanya B'fneim B'kavod Gadol. They were making a great cover for them. So Yashav Rabbi Shua ben Prachya, and he was being mishtabeach in the innkeeper, who was a woman. He was saying, he said as follows, he says, Kama Noach Achsanya Zu. How nice, look how wonderful this woman, this Achsanya, this innkeeper is, that she's taking care of us. So Amr Lo Yeshu, this is where Chazal referred to Yeshu. Amr Lo Yeshu was one of Rabbi Shua ben Prachya's Talmidim who was sitting there. He tells his Rebbe, Einea Trutis, her eyes are a little bit round. You're saying she looks really good. She doesn't look that great. Her eyes are a little round, they're not the perfect shape. What do you say? Yeah. So Amr Loi, Rabbi Shua ben Prachya responds to him, he says, Rasha, Bekach ata oisik? That's what you think I'm busy with? You think I'm describing her physical appearance? That you're going to tell me that Rebbe, maybe you didn't pay attention. Her eyes are not so beautiful. I'm talking about it. Bekachat Isaac. So Haitzi Arba Meis Shayfaris. He took out 400 Shayfaris, Vechrimu, and he put them in Chayru. Yeshu, for speaking about the physical characteristics of this woman, his Rebbe, in this type of crass manner, Rabbi Shua ben Prachi puts him in Chayru. So it says, B'chol Yom Balafanav, every day Yeshu would come back in front of his Rebbe, but like Kiblui, he wasn't asking to accept him back into the fold, to allow him back into the Olam. Yom Echad, Haya Kairi Kriyishma. Rabbi Shua ben Prachi was reading Kriyishma. Balafanav, Yeshu came in front of him, Haya B'daita the Kabli. And at this point, Rabbi Shua ben Prachi felt that it was time, it was enough. He kept him in the cold enough, and it was time to bring him back in. But he was in the middle of Kriyishma. So Ramaz lay biyadei. He held up his hand. Ein minut. So Savar Yeshu Shedachya Decheyu. Yeshu thought that's it. Like, I tried so many times and he's pushing me away again. He thought I'm really on the outs. He's never going to let me back in. I'm sorry. So Halach v'Hamid Levana v'Avadaisis. So Yeshu stood up on Avodah Zarah. He made a moon, a mus of the moon, and he began to be Ovid. He said, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not waiting anymore for Rebbe to let me back in. I'm going to be Ovid Avodah Zarah. So then Rabbi Shua ben Prachi feels bad. Amar Lai Rabbi Shua ben Prachi Chazar b'cha. Do tshuva. Come back. You can come back. It's not too late. Amar Lai. So Yeshu tells him back. Kach mekublani mimecha. I was mekabel from you a different time. Kol achayte u'machti es arabim ein maspikim biyadei lasis tshuva. Anyone who's chayti and drags other people down with him, he's machti es arabim, he's not going to be biyadei lasis tshuva. And mela, I'm out. I'm done. I'm out of here. And that's it. And on this, the Gemara comments, and it says, La'olam, a person shouldn't be madcha someone with beis yadayim. Don't push someone away in such a final manner that there's no way back. Kir Rabbi Shua ben Prachi, like Rabbi Shua ben Prachi did. Ela tehei yamin mekarev v'smol tehei small deich yamin mekarev. Yeah, small deich yamin mekarev. You leave a way to get back. Now this is the primary Gemara that describes Yeshu. Now the problem with this is that the timing is very off. He took his Talmidim. They also say he took Talmidim. Yeshu was very charismatic, and when he went to make an Avodah Zarah to Din, he took Talmidim with him. We'll see until this Yeshu, if we ever actually get to read it, that he had 400 Talmidim at a Tkufa. He had many Talmidim that he brought along with him. Now, the problem is that the Christian dating is we start the calendar from the year 0, right? We're in 2022. Year 0 is the year that Yeshu was born. And Yeshu dies at 33 years old. So according to that calculation, in the year 33, Yeshu died. The Churban of the Beis HaMikdash happens in the year 72, which is about 40 years later. Now, according to this cheshbon, Rabbi Shua ben Prachi was 4 dairos before the Churban. Rabbi Shua ben Prachi was at least 130 years before the dating that they're saying. Meaning it would have to be that Yeshu lived 130 years earlier than what is like the conventional time that they're saying, which is not a problem. Because many Rishonim, the Tashbitz and the Ramban and others, the Even Ezra all say, Vada, Yeshu lived with Rabbi Shua ben Prachi, lived 130 years before the Churban, but they wanted to imply, the Christians wanted to imply that the reason the Churban happened was because the Jews didn't accept Yeshu, didn't accept the Mashiach of Yeshu, and therefore the Churban happened for them. So they wanted very much to push them as close as they can to the Tkufa of the Churban, so they just, moved the dates. Dates were not so set in stone, they moved the dates a little bit. Now, so that's what many Rishonim hold. There are Rishonim who say that there's a different Gemara. There's a Gemara that talks about Miriam, and the Gemara says a person shouldn't be like. Oh, I forgot his name now. 1 second. A person shouldn't be like. Hang on, Papas ben Yehuda. That's the name. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Gittin says a person shouldn't be like Papas ben Yehuda, because Papas ben Yehuda, when he would go out to market, he would lock his wife in the house so that she shouldn't socialize and talk to anybody. He was very careful. He was watching. He would lock his wife in the house. The Gemara says a person shouldn't be like that, because when you create too many restrictions, you end up creating rebellion. And what's the story of Papas ben Yehuda? That his wife Miriam was locked in the house when he went to market, and she called out to this guy, to Yosef, from the street, and they ran away together. He helped her climb down. They ran away together, and they had a baby. A whole nother version. And that's another version that some Rishonim say is where the baby Yeshu comes from. And that version, the timing works better. It's a little closer to the tkufa of the year 0 to 33 and whatever. So these are two versions from the Gemara. And then Grace Machlekes Rishonim, which one is the primary version of which Yeshu is. Now, with that in mind, the Toledot Yeshu that we have, most of the versions that we have, say that it's the time of Hilni HaMalka, which is closer to the Churban, meaning from the last kings of the Churban, which doesn't shtim with the Gemara in Sanhedrin, just right away off the bat. It doesn't shtim, and this is Sefer's first Hagah that he makes in it, is that it doesn't shtim with the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which is the traditional Gemara that we believe is describing who Yeshu was, but this is going at a later date. So it says there was a Yeshu who lived in the time of Hilni Amalka, and he was the whole story with Yosef and Miriam, it brings to it, and then it says he was a mamzer, right? Because he was born of this union between Yosef, the guy, and Miriam, the Jewish woman. And his Rebbeim, Reb Akiva, and Reb Tarfon, his midas were like a mamzer. He was like an arrogant guy. He didn't shtaltzu. He wasn't doing the right thing. And they commented about him that he's a mamzer. And it says he waited until he went into the Beis HaMikdash and he learned the Shem HaMefarish. It says there was a place in the Beis HaMikdash where one could learn the Shem HaMefarish, but as soon as you'd leave, you'd forget it. And he learned a certain kishuf that would allow him to not be afraid when he leaves. And he learned the Shem HaMefarish, and he went out and he had the Shem HaMefarish. And with the Shem HaMefarish, he began to perform miracles. He turned water into wine, and he walked on water, and all the miracles that the Christians say that Yeshu committed are the same in the Toledot Yeshu, more or less. And he committed these miracles, and he was being ma'asif, a kahila of followers around him who were very impressed with his miracles. So, Ma'osul Chachamim, they put up a specific Chacham to it to go learn the Shem HaMefarish as well, so that he'll be able to battle with him on his own terms. And they put up, I think his name was Shimon, I believe, or I don't have to find everything in here, but they put up another Chacham to learn the Shem HaMefarish, who went and learned the Shem HaMefarish, and goes and he does battle, Kilo, with Yeshu, and he makes Yeshu lose his powers. And when Yeshu loses his powers, they hold him in front of the queen, and they say, this guy is doing kishuf, kayidua, the halacha is, mechashif has to die, and she's not impressed with the Rabbanim at all, and she says, nah, he's doing amazing things, he's healing the sick, he's giving money to the poor, he's a wonderful guy, and he's able to slip out, and he goes to Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, he learns kishuf from a not holy source. He learns another version of kishuf that he could work with, that's from a not holy source, and he comes back to Yerushalayim 2 years later in an opportune moment, and he begins doing Mavsim again. And again, the Chacham are very upset by his Mavsim, and they protest, they go to the king again, and again, they have to use a certain tachpula, they pour meiraglayim on him, it says, and that's the way to strip him of his powers of doing Mavsim. And this time, the powers that be are impressed that he's a rebel, he's rebel-rousing, and he's creating a problem, and they sentence him to death. Okay, now, rather, the Christian church today believes that the Jews didn't kill Yeshu, that it was the Romans who killed Yeshu. In Toledot Yeshu, it says the Jews killed Yeshu. So there's different versions. In Toledot Yeshu, it says that we killed him. The Erev Pesach, they took him out of the Talu. And now how they hung him, why was he hung in that manner? That's not the way, if you look in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that's not the manner that someone is hung in. And the reason is because Yeshu, in one of his final acts of Kishuf power, he was mashbia all trees, not to let them hang him on him. And no tree would accept him. Every time they hung him, he fell down. So they had to take a strong cabbage stalk, a cabbage stalk that was strong enough to hold the weight of his body, but wasn't tall enough to hang him off it from the top. And they had to hang him in this creative manner in order to make him, to be able to kill him and things. I'm just saying over everything that it says here, even though these are all things that are shver from Gemaras and Chazal and Sefer. It's not a real Mises Bezdin. Bezdin wasn't killing people at that point anymore. 80 years before the Churban, Bezdin stopped killing people. So it was like an extra, it was like a Hira Shah. Like this guy's mamash out of whack, it was a Hira Shah. It wasn't a regular Mises Bezdin. So then it continues and it talks about the story of so Kayidua, the Christians say that Yeshu left his grave. He was rebirthed. 5 days later, he was reborn. And that's Easter. They have the whole holiday they celebrate. Now, in here also, it says that there were some Jews who were afraid that they were going to make his body into a shrine, into a relic, into like a heilige thing to worship. So in order to prevent that, there was a Jew who went and stole it out of the grave and hid it somewhere else. He buried it somewhere else. Now came along his Talmidim Taka 3 days later, and they went to the grave to dig it up, and he's not there. And they said, oh my God, he's Mashiach, he's Taka Ben Elikim, he's Taka God, look, he's not here. And they started making a huge thing out of it. And the Chachamim will geyser a tainus, because they didn't know what to do, until one of the Chachamim met the person who had dug him up, and he said, oh, please, he's right here. I have him in my backyard. And they dug him up a second time, and they dragged him, paraded him through the streets of Yerushalayim dead, to show him that he wasn't alive, to which they said it wasn't really him, and back and forth, and it ends off that fights were raging amongst the supporters of Yeshu, who said that yeah, we're Jewish and we believe in Yiddishkeit, but look at this. The guy had Tchias HaMesim, literally 3 at them saying within 3 days he had Tchias HaMesim. You know anybody else that happens to? And the others were saying, no, he was just a Mechara from a Gadif, a Mechashev. What do you say?
Supporters were Christian?
What does it mean to be a Christian? They were all Jews. I'm saying, what do you say? Yeah, they were all Jews. They were, Shimon and Yitzchak said this way, and Yosef and Matisyahu said something else. You know what I'm saying? It's like, they were all Jews.
At some point the Christians grabbed the story as their...
Yeah, so at a later time, so that's what I want to get. So one second. So let me just get to how this has to do with Tes B'Teves. 1 second. So it ends off like this, on this note, that there's a huge battle going on between the supporters and the antis. Fine. So there was this Greisa Talmud Chacham, his name was Shimon Pekula, Shimon HaPekuda, there's different versions of it, who lived in Yerushalayim, who seemed to have been somewhere in the middle. Everybody was trying to gain his support. The early Christians were trying to gain his support, and the regular people were trying to gain his support. And his opinion seemed to matter. He was a Greisa Talmud Chacham, a Greisa Chayker. And it was getting out of hand, the fighting, and it says in here, in Toledot Yeshu, that the Chachamim went to him and they asked him, do us a teva, pretend you're on the side of the new Christians, go along with them, and just separate them. Give them new rules to follow so that they don't think they're the Jews and they have to change all of us. So it says, Shimon went and he committed himself to this new ideology, and he went with them, and he's the one who changed that Shabbos should be Sunday, and that Christians don't need a bris milah, and that kashrus is not important. There's many, many rules. And this is taka true, they believe that too, that Saint Peter, the first pope, established for Christians that Christians don't have to have all the same rules as Jews. The new Jew doesn't need to have the same new rules as the old Jew. Now says the Toledot Yeshu that this Peter was Shimon, who the Chachamim convinced to go, who in his heart always stayed as being a frum Jew, but was just sent on this mission, this secret mission to blow them off track. Ad kedei kach, that there are many sources that say that Shimon, who became the Pope in Rome, would sit in his room when no one was around him. He'd write piyutim, and he would mail them back to Yerushalayim for the Jews to use. Ad kedei kach, that there are those who say the tefillah of Nishmas that we say in davening is from Shimon, Saint Peter, the first Pope of Christianity. There are those who say that the nusach that we say in Yom Kippur, the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, Ametz Kayach, comes from Shimon. He's the one who organized it. So I don't know which one, what's true, what's not true, but meaning there's a great legend that certain very, very important tefillahs that Klal Yisrael still say today come from the tefillahs that he was misakin. And the day that he died was Tes Teves. The day that Shimon, Saint Peter, dies is Tes Teves. And to celebrate the yahrzeit of Shimon, who's not going to have anybody saying Kaddish for him because he's a Christian and didn't leave over anything in our world, is Tes Teves. And because of that, Chazal, out of their great gratitude to Shimon for doing this for Klal Yisrael, were keveya his yahrzeit to be a tainus for everybody. And leinoida taima is not leinoida, but we're not able to tell you the reason, because if we tell you the reason, enough la simon, everybody knows what happened. And that's how Sefer Toledot Yeshu ties into this tainus of Tes B'Teves that's tomorrow. I think with this we'll leave Nittel alone. We'll move on to something different. It's all in Toledot Yeshu.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.